Well, good morning, folks. Welcome to Miyagi Mornings, episode 32. We're still here on YouTube. They haven't banned us yet. They might. I don't know. I kind of dared them to yesterday. Just in case they ever do, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's better on Odyssey. I know some of you guys tried Odyssey for a while and said they had, problems and all. Odyssey is an emerging company with emerging technology building up the robustness of the backbone of their blockchain, which means, yeah, sometimes things might not play perfectly, but they'll always be there and they won't be taken down. And it gets better and better. And I can't say exactly how, but my channel should perform a little bit better than the average channel right now during some beta testing that I'm part of. So give it another try if you haven't yet. Remember, you can tip your creators on library/Odyssey. It's the same thing on the same backbone with a different kind of GUI interface. So anyway, on to other things. Today's topic of the day is one of the top 10 most asked questions that I get as a survival teacher and as a permaculturist and as someone that teaches lifestyle design and food production is a component of that. How much land do I need to grow all my own food, or how much land do I really need? Those are multiple versions of the same question. And like any switched on permaculturist, when you give me something that broad, I'm going to start out with the classic, well, it depends. But today, instead of it depends answer, I'm going to give you more of a generalization and try to give you a basic answer that will work for the largest number of people. So we have to start out with something. And I have to be very, very clear about this. You're not ever going to grow 100% of your own food. If you want to see what it takes to do that, check out Rob Greenfield's channel and his experiment where he did just that. He either grew, foraged, or bartered for his own food. And if he bartered for it, it had to be kind of like self-grown or self-foraged. He couldn't like barter for steak from the supermarket. And he did it for a year. He had some health issues. He lost a lot of weight, but he proved it could be done. But I'm going to tell you what else he proved, that most people will never do it. And he grew a butt ton of food. He grew so much food, he was giving some food away. But when you try to produce all your own food through horticulture, not farming, you are going to only be able to grow certain things. And you're going to need to grow and produce more fat and things like that. And so what held him back on some degree was, well, how do you get chickens if you have to grow their own food and you're living in the backyard of somebody, quarter-acre property? So just throw that out. You're not going to grow your own food, 100% of your own food. And that's okay. You don't need to, because if you have a surplus that's barterable or exchangeable in other things, you can use whatever piece of value you get for that to acquire the other foods that you want to consume, because that's the second part of this. You want things that you're not going to grow. See this? This is hollow roast coffee. It's delicious. Nicole Sauce roasted it in Tennessee. I live in Texas, and neither one of us can grow coffee beans. Not practically anyway. So I want coffee. In my coffee is whole cream. I don't have a cow. I'm not going to get a cow. Frankly, I don't want the work that goes with a cow. So I'm not going to be able to produce that particular fat nor butter for myself. See what I'm saying? I have to buy some things, or barter or exchange for some things. I get an awful lot of meat through barter. I get meat through hunting. I get meat through, I guess you call it road foraging, because even though it's against the law, I will pick a dead deer up in Texas and bring it home and process it if it's in good shape and recently hit. So there's a lot of ways I can augment this, but guys, my wife's going to run by the grocery store today on the way home for some stuff. So the way you got to start thinking about this is self-sufficiency and self-reliance, and thinking of those differently. So self-reliance is a word that gets used interoperably and shouldn't be with self-sufficiency. We measure self-reliance in time. So when you have all your systems put together, include your self-sufficient systems and just your storage, and if somebody pulled the plug and you couldn't go anywhere or leave and you had to stay home and you could be basically okay for 3 months, you have 3 months of self-reliance. You see, it works in time. Self-sufficiency is how we have to think about it when it comes to producing food from our land. We measure self-sufficiency in percentile, not time. And that can add to our time, but we still measure it in time to make our mind work right. What do I mean by this? So, if I have a garden and that garden produces 25% of all the food I consume, I'm 25% self-sufficient. And I'm self-sufficient indefinitely. There is no time limit on it other than if I get sick or old and I can't tend the garden anymore. But as long as I can tend my garden, and if I'm smart, I build my garden to accommodate aging. That's why I like my gardens nice and raised up. I don't have to bend over as much. Or if I have a grandchild or a neighbor that can help me out. My self-sufficiency, even though it's only 25% of my consumption, is unlimited with time. It goes on forever. That's what makes it sufficient versus reliant. If I have batteries to run my flashlight for 3 weeks, I am self-reliant in lighting for 3 weeks. All right. So now let's take it back to land. And everything we said, and that you're not going to grow 100% of your own food. You're not going to grow all your own food. You don't need to. You're thinking wrong. We need to be thinking about building community, working with our neighbors, etc. And not everybody's going to do everything unless that's all you do all day long every day. In general, now be careful when I say this. I think that kind of an ideal homestead is going to have about a minimum of a half acre. I even have a whole series on my podcast called Half Acre Homesteading. And I want to be clear when I say that. You can do a lot on a quarter of an acre, right? And you can do a lot on 3 acres like I have, or 5 acres, or 50, or 500. When I say a half acre is ideal, what I'm actually talking about, though, is not you bought a house with a half acre lot. That can work. Don't take what I'm about to say wrong. What I mean is I'm looking in an ideal situation for somebody to really produce a lot of what they're going to consume and or sell for a profit so they can buy other stuff. A half acre of usable space. A half acre usable space. Right now I live on 3 acres. Pretty much 100% of it, other than where the buildings sit, is usable one way or another. It's flat, it's laid out nice. I don't have neighbors up my ass, I don't have any HOA, so I can do anything I want with it. I could have almost all 3 acres in, raised bed gardens. What sucks is my soil sucks. My soil doesn't just suck in quality, it sucks in depth. A lot of my property, my soil is 3 to 4 inches deep. Some places it's less. And then it's slab rock. So I'm basically gardening on a parking lot. So I have to do raised beds and such. This exact same property, if it was down 50 miles southeast of me in the Blackland Prairie, there's that same rock there, but it's like 80 feet down. I could farm the whole thing down there if it's the same exact layout, and the layout's really great. So you got to look at the way the property lays. What's the solar orientation? How many trees are there? But if whatever that comes out to, you could have a 5 acre property, and you could have a nice half acre that you can have good solar aspect to, do your greenhouse, little pond, all that stuff, and it's everything and more than you need. Or you could have an acre with a half acre doing that. It could be the same thing. You have to look at neighbors, restrictions. You have to look at, when you have limitations on your design restrictions, they go in levels. And like level 1 is like a mountain. If a mountain shades your property, it will always shade your property. It's immovable. Level 2 is like codes and laws. They can be changed, but it's very, very difficult. It's easier to blow the top off the mountain sometimes than it is to change a code that says you can't have a chicken. So you have to look at those restrictions. If you have an unrestricted area, a nice laying, somewhat square-ish or trapezoidal half acre, not only can it produce most of what you need, most people can't really effectively manage much more as just themselves and maybe a partner and their family. Because now we can look at, within that half acre, we can do ducks or chickens or both. We can do quail, we can do rabbits, we can do a pond like the one behind me. This is an 8x8 pond. I mean, this will fit in almost any suburban backyard. I would definitely go, if you're ever going to build one of these, straight out to a 12x12. If you can dig a hole, you can do the 12x12 I had. Be only about 30 inches high. That'll keep your ducks out mostly anyway. Maybe you put a little fence around it to if you have ducks to reiterate that. But then you can go 3, 4, 5, 6 foot down. You can go get yourself an above ground pool as long as you don't have that restriction. And I've been saying this, but I mean, even if you paid somebody to come install the pool for you with a bobcat to put it 2 feet in the ground, because you put an above ground pool 2 feet in the ground, you can get that done for about $1,000 in work, and you can probably get the pool for free off of Craigslist and then pick up a new liner for a couple $100. So under $1,000 all in, even if you don't do all the work, you could have a 24,000 gallon pond. And then you don't have a pond. If anybody asks, no, you have a pool. Right? And you're just using a natural filtration system that happens to grow fish. And then we got to start looking at, well, what are the actual goals here? You're not going to produce 100% of your own food, so start thinking in percentages. So if I grow chickens and I pick a dual purpose bird, if you want a lot of meat from chickens, I don't recommend that. If something's good at two things, it excels at neither generally in livestock. But you could take something like a Brahma chicken breed, something that's fairly large, fairly substantial, and then you can incubate your own eggs, and maybe you produce 25 roosters a year that you could sell the pullets, right? The girls, you can sell them off to neighbors and friends, put them on Craigslist. They go like that, folks. Especially if they're like 8 to 12 weeks old, where you're like, okay, these are females and these are males, and then eat your roosters. If you produce 25 roosters a year every other week, you could have one chicken for dinner. Now you have 1/14. It's a start of your protein for your primary protein meal. If they're also giving you eggs, though eggs are so underrated as a protein because they're subsidized in this country and we buy them for pennies. But the kind of eggs you can produce in a backyard system, now you've got, with a small flock, you can produce enough eggs that your family eats eggs every day. There's another piece of your protein and fat requirement. Now, if we put in a rabbit hutch and we grow enough rabbits to have one rabbit a week, now we're at 1/7, right? Now we're starting to, 2 to 3 meals a week we can bank on the protein and fat from our backyard. Rabbits don't have fat. Backyard rabbits that are well-fed have fat, and fry them in bacon, grease, and butter and shut up. Okay, you're not going to get rabbit starvation. I'm not even going to go down there. Now, if we put in a pond and we start growing our own fish, maybe a couple ponds, we put in some minnow tanks that filter down into the pond, etc. So we're having a very low feed bill. If we can take 1 meal worth of fish, just 1 meal worth of fish a week out of this pond, and sustain it either with breeding in the pond, or we can go down to the park pond and catch some small fish. And, hey, I took out 8 fish over the last 3 weeks. When I go fishing, I need to bring at least 10 in case a couple die home and throw them in there. If we just do that, now we've got another 7th. All of a sudden, we're getting into the neighborhood of 25 to 30% of our protein, not even talking about gardening yet. Now, if we start gardening, we start taking some of what we're gardening, we feed it to the ducks, we start building other systems, then we can start to expand out. And it's reasonable that a half acre that's workable without killing yourself, horticulture versus farming, you'll be able to produce 40, 50, 60% of your nutritional requirements. Now, the largest expense that we have in society today, other than housing and frickin' health insurance, because boy, the government fixed that, didn't they, is our food bill. So if we can cut our third to fourth, some people's car payments, because you buy stupid expensive cars. If we can take our third to fourth largest expense that we have and cut it by 50% or more and eat better quality, what's that half acre worth? I just want to reiterate, quarter acre probably can do almost as much if you're clever with how you design it. But you might need an acre or 2 to get that. In Arkansas, the property I had there was 5 acres, 2 acres more than I have here. I had about a third of an acre that was really usable unless I wanted to get in bulldozers and chainsaws, and I didn't, and it was really steep too. So unless I wanted to start terracing stuff and all, I had this piece out front, and it was what it was, and it did fine for that. It wasn't like this where I have all this livestock running around. It didn't make sense. It wasn't. So you got to look at not raw acreage, usable. And what I would tell you is, for most of you, I know some of you like, man, I want like 500 acres. As long as you know why, fine. As long as you have a plan to manage it, fine. But if you gave me 500 acres, it was mostly wooded, I would probably almost never touch it with a chainsaw or a bulldozer. I might earthwork and set up and do ponds and dams and silvopasture on about 4 to 5 acres. And the rest of it would be zone 5 permaculture, baby. It would just be wild managed. Maybe a little bit of zone 4 horticulture spread through it. And then I got deer, I got mushrooms, I got, if there's any kind of native water on the, more fish, etc. And it's more of a buffer from the people around you. As a human being, especially if you're not going to be a full-time farmer, you don't have time to do the type of work that it takes to feed yourself 100%. It's weird. It's hard to do 100%, but it's not that hard to do 50. That's a good target. It's a good place to start. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. It went long, but it's a complex question, and I didn't bail out of it with an "it depends." So I hope you liked it. We'll be back tomorrow. Remember, if you want to suggest a topic or ask a question for Miyagi Mornings, just send me an email, jack@thesurvivalpodcast.com, with Miyagi Mornings in the subject line.